Hey everyone, this is Bunny. Today we're going to be painting some terrain. So I'm going to get started while I talk. So I am painting an actual room. This is a stone room inside a building. And this is actually the Hall of Heroes from Dungeons and Lasers. Now I have people ask me where I get my models. So if it's not 3D printed, I will put the link. This is not 3D printed, by the way. This is actual, you purchase them, they're high quality plastic. They're fantastic. I really do recommend Dungeons and Lasers. I will put links in the video description about where you can purchase these yourself. I'll put a direct from the manufacturer, which is my preferred way to buy. And then if there's like an Amazon link or something, I will add that as well. So what I'm doing here is this is the Hall of Heroes, and it's primarily stone. So this is a really easy thing to paint. The trick with this kind of thing is don't get caught up in nothingness. Okay? Don't get caught up in stuff that doesn't matter. So things that don't matter are the tiny little details. So I am literally just taking the color I love to use for stone. I use this, they call it pewter gray, but it's definitely not a pewter gray, but that's the color on the bottle. Okay? That's the color on the bottle. It's not a pewter gray. This is more of a stone gray. And the thing I love about this one is when it dries, it's kind of got a gritty texture. And I absolutely love it for stone. And it also kind of self-levels, so I don't have to worry about brush marks. So I like to use this paint for stone. Now, I'm not going to worry about little tiny details because I'm going to do two things. I'm going to use probably a dark umber wash, a thinned out dark umber wash to highlight these cracks because they're important. You want to highlight those cracks. But I'm not sure yet, but sometimes with fantasy terrain, and this is a fantasy terrain, sometimes what I end up doing is I end up painting them and then doing a gold wash over the top. And the reason I do a gold wash over the top is because it makes them look really cool. So I'm not sure I'm going to do that because I'm pretty sure these details, like in the middle of this piece, that big runic, almost dwarven type drawing, I'm pretty sure I am going to take that and paint it gold. So I'm not sure I want to do a gold wash over the entire thing. We'll see. I might do a very pale, maybe not a wash. I might decide to dry brush with just the littlest bit of gold. I might decide to do that. But when you are painting something like this, you notice there's a lot of grooves. Get paint in those grooves. You don't have to glob the paint in there. Like, you don't want a lot of paint gumming up those grooves. You don't want those grooves completely blocked. But what you do want is a nice coat that goes into those grooves so that when you're putting a wash down, you have a good base of paint for that wash to sit on. Okay, so we're just going to do that. And obviously I have to do this in 2 passes. Now there's multiple pieces of each piece here. Okay, there's multiple pieces. There are, like, I don't know how many of this piece I'm painting. There's 3 or more. 3, I think. There's 3 of the big floors. There's, what else is there? There's, of the doors, there's 3, and there's a bunch of the little walls, a bunch of the big walls. I think there's 3 big walls and something like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 little walls. So I'm only on camera going to paint 1 of each piece because otherwise, what am I even doing? Like, we're not going to sit here and watch me paint all of them. But this is a fairly quick paint job. So don't focus on things that don't matter. So the things that matter here are the stone, which is why it's getting a good coat of paint. So the stone is getting a decent coat. And what else matters? Well, in this particular bit, so these particular guys, what else matters? The gold symbols in the middle, the runic kind of dwarven symbols in the middle, those matter. because they stand out. So I'm going to paint them gold. You obviously, if you were painting the same thing, you don't have to paint them gold. And I had someone ask, seems like you paint a lot of Dungeons and Lasers stuff. I do. I really like their items. Okay, I really like them. I think they're fantastic. Okay, so I absolutely do paint a lot of Dungeons and Lasers stuff. I recommend people purchase it. No, I don't work for the company. I know somebody asked that. I don't work for the company. I just happen to really like it. Okay, I really like their stuff. It's fantastic stuff. I like the quality. These all assemble with little clips, and they're absolutely fantastic. So yes, I love them. No, I don't work for the company. No, I don't get any kind of kickback. I'm not sponsored, nothing like that. I know a couple people have asked. If I like a product, it's because I like a product. Okay, so I really enjoy this particular company. I love their product, and I'm going to keep purchasing their product. So I recommend them. If you don't like to buy pre-painted terrain, if you like 3D printed, for example, I love 3D printed. I have a bunch of 3D printed terrain. But if you like buying stuff that's already printed, so you don't have to 3D print it, I really do recommend the Dungeons and Lasers. Again, see the link in the video description for their actual homepage. I believe they're based in Poland, and it's absolutely fantastic. I love them. I do every Kickstarter. I only didn't do their first Kickstarter because I didn't know they existed when they did their first Kickstarter, which is pretty normal for a first Kickstarter. Sometimes you don't know. Anyway, I am not going to paint the rest of the pieces on camera. I'm going to paint them off camera, and we will come back and add more gray, and you'll notice some of the pieces are going to need to be flipped and have the other side done. So we'll do that once this first coat is dry. Okay, we have now waited for this stuff to dry. So what we're going to do now is do the other half, or the other part. This isn't entirely half because I painted quite a lot. So one piece of advice I have is, if you're painting something like this, where you're dealing with having to set it aside and let it dry and come back, and there are large areas like this of one color, make sure all of the color comes from the same bottle. Even if it's the same manufacturer and the same color paint, the bottles can vary a little bit from bottle to bottle. And the most annoying thing is when you do something like this and it turns out it dries to a slightly different color. So try to use all of your paint for this base, for the one set. Use all from one bottle. Even if it means you have to open up a new bottle, it's better to do that than it is to have to deal with the mismatched color. Because the mismatched color, there's nothing more annoying than the mismatched color. Trust me, I've been there. So don't mismatch your colors. What you want to do is make sure you're using all of your paint from one bottle. Okay? For just small areas, it's not that big a deal because you won't notice it. But on something like this, where you're painting large pieces of terrain at once, you will end up noticing it in a heartbeat. Okay? It will be very easy to spot because you'll see it. It's such a big thing. If this whole section was a slightly different color, you would notice in a heartbeat. So just try to make sure that you are using all of the color from one paint bottle. Okay? Use the excess in a leftover paint bottle for something else. Don't use it for this. Okay? I'm not saying throw it out. I'm saying it's a bad idea to mix colors from the same bottle. From different bottles, sorry. Just because it's going to have a slightly different shade, or it might. It's not necessarily going to, it just might. So try to make sure it all comes from one bottle. Don't throw out the old bottle, just use it for a smaller project. Okay, now we're gonna have to come back and flip over 3 of the pieces because they do need painting on their backside. And I will, off camera, finish painting up the rest of the guys. So we'll be back in just an instant for you, but a couple of hours for me. All right, now we have to flip over some of these pieces. Not all these pieces need flipping over. So obviously the pieces that are floors do not need to be turned over. Just these wall pieces. So don't paint what you don't have to paint, okay? There's no point in painting what you don't have to paint. So I'm only painting the spots that will be visible once this whole thing is assembled. And these Dungeons and Lasers pieces are assembled with clips, so they can be taken down and assembled in any pattern you want. So that's why I like them. They're really useful when we play because we do a lot of changing things around, and we like to be able to really change up how our building is, and this allows us to be completely creative. And we like that. So that's why I like these. And they're really easy to paint. They're really high quality. So it's not that I don't have other things that are not Dungeons and Lasers. Of course I do. It's just lately I've really been liking the Dungeons and Lasers stuff. So in this pass, I'm only painting 2 pieces, long walls and short walls, and obviously a door that I just forgot about. But yes, I don't have a ton to paint in this pass, and then in the next pass we'll finish up the walls and doors, and then we'll come back and we'll start adding a little bit of accents. So again, we're not going to fuss a ton. Okay, we're just not going to be fussy, because are you going to be staring at your walls? Probably not. Probably not staring at the walls during your campaign. You're probably paying attention to what characters are doing. You're trying to figure out what your DM has in store. You know, all the stuff. You're busy not trusting your DM. You're not. That's us. We're busy not trusting our DM because he's always got something up his sleeve, and not paying as much attention to the terrain, though it's great to have it painted. I do recommend that if you use terrain and you use miniatures, that you do give them a quick paint job. So is it worth it to pay someone else to do your painting? Yes, if you really don't want to do it yourself, or if you want a really high quality job. See, on this channel, we're focusing on quick and easy. That's why I'm not doing any of the more. I might do airbrushing at some point, show you guys how. But generally, airbrushing is a more difficult technique, and it's not something you're going to do very often because it's hard to master, hard to do, and it's just not something you're going to want to do very often if you're just looking for quick and easy. But we're going to let that dry, then we're going to come back, flip them around, and finish off the gray. After we're done with the gray, we will move on to our accents. Okay, these are actually mostly dry, and I'm saying mostly because a little bit in the grooves is not. So we're just going to finish them off and then let them completely dry. So again, we're just using our nice, they call it a pewter. It's not pewter. This is the color it's called on the bottle. It's called pewter gray. It's not pewter gray, but that's what they call it. It makes a really nice stone, and this particular brand has a little bit of grit to it, which can be annoying when you're actually doing the painting, but when it dries, it has some texture. And so when you have that texture, it almost feels like stone, which is nice. So I like that about it. Not everybody likes that. That's why it's not a super popular brand, but I like it because it allows me to paint something with a little bit of grit without having to add grit. Technically, you can add grit to any paint. You get a little bit of craft sand, so not sand out of your driveway. That stuff has all kinds of goobers in it. Buy a good quality craft sand and add that a little bit at a time to your paint, a little bit at a time, not lots. And you can add a little grit yourself, but I actually just prefer this stuff. This stuff works really well. So that's what I am using. So I'll finish painting the remainder of the gray off camera because I'm only showing you one of each piece. But we will come back when that's all dry, and we will literally start on our gold accents. But we're not going to do that till that layer's dry. Well, our gray is completely dry. Let's start on our gold accents. So you can really decide when you're accenting your terrain exactly what you want it to look like. And in my case, I want only gold accents. Could I add like silvers and stuff? Sure. But I don't want to go too fussy. So that piece is only getting those 3. This piece is getting the middle, because that one doesn't have any runic designs. This does. So then we're gonna do these runic designs. And I'm doing a fairly decent amount of paint, because I don't want, oops, I don't want a situation where I don't have enough coverage. That's my thing. I want to make sure I have enough coverage here for this to stand out, because I don't want it not to stand out. I don't want a dull gold, especially because I'm going to hit this with like an umber wash and it'll pull all the colors down. And because it's going to pull all the colors down, I got to start with something bright. So that's what I'm doing, starting with something fairly bright. There we go. So again, don't get too worried when it comes to your terrain. That's a dog hitting my door. But don't get too worried about your terrain. Just quietly and gently draw your patterns, okay? Gently draw your patterns. There we go. I'm not getting too fussy. So this wall, so I'm not going to bother painting those ones on camera, but this wall, because those ones are the same. This wall we're going to, again, you want to just go carefully, go slow, so you don't have to redo it, because redoing it is not fun. And the other thing I want to mention is this piece has mainly raised gold areas that I would want to do in gold, but it also has a couple of recessed areas. And those recessed areas can be problematic, because if you try to put paint in there, you're just going to basically make a mess. So what we're going to do is not paint those recessed areas. Okay, we're not going to paint the recessed areas. Instead, we are going to paint the just the raised areas. So the recessed areas like on the hammer there, we're going to skip that. And we're going to come back and paint, there we go. We're going to come back and paint that later at the very end, and we're actually going to use a really diluted gold, like almost a gold wash, to set in there. But I am going to do here in gold, here in gold, here in gold, and here. And I could do that hammer in silver, but I'm literally just not wanting to. I only want to use gold. Again, I find if you get too crazy with your terrain, it just draws your eye away from your actual campaign. Remember, the idea here is when I'm painting, I'm looking at what I'm going to be using in a campaign. So what I'm going to be using in a campaign, it kind of determines how I paint the terrain. Like this terrain is going in a campaign with the wyvern I painted a few weeks ago. So a couple weeks ago, this wasn't that long ago, just 2 weeks. There we go. So because of that, I want the wyvern to stand out with his bronze wings, and that's what I want. This I do want it to exist, obviously, but I don't want it to stand out too much. Now this piece doesn't have anything on that side, so it only has the one bit on here. So that's what's getting painted. Just the one bit. It only has one side. The other wall has another side, so we'll have to come back and do that other side. But this wall, the small walls, they only have decorations on one side, not two. And again, I'm going to paint the duplicate pieces off camera instead of trying to do it all on camera, because you don't need to watch me paint the exact same piece over and over again, because that's boring. Don't need to watch the same piece. But it is fun to watch different pieces. See, I find painting this kind of stuff really relaxing. The reason I find it so relaxing is these are nothing paints. These are nothing paint jobs. They're not difficult. They're easy to do, fairly quick. So this entire video is filmed over about a day and a half, only because of having to wait for paint to dry. Like, I let the gray dry overnight and stuff, just to make sure. Finally, this guy. This guy, he's got some kind of decorations that are inset up at the top, a couple of runes, but I'm not doing those right now. I will do them, but I'm going to use, again, that diluted paint. And then I'm going to finish painting everything else off camera. And then when we come back, I'll start doing the umber wash. That's the plan right now. I'm going to do the umber wash. We have to come back and do the other side of the door and the other side of the large wall. Otherwise, we're almost done. All right, so only a couple of these pieces have to be flipped. So just these long walls. So we're going to take these long walls. These have a really nice thick pattern. So we're just going to draw that thick pattern in our gold, because we really like that thick pattern. There we go. And then the door has its other side is identical to its first side. So because they're identical, it has the little icons in the corner. So we're just going to get these. Remember, you don't have to be perfect. You can always go back and fix it later if it bothers you. But imperfections never really bother me because the world isn't perfect. If you were building this in real life, it wouldn't be perfect either. So imperfections don't bother me. Big mistakes bother me, not imperfections. There we go. That guy and this guy. Everyone else only has one side to worry about. So we are going to paint these guys. Then we're going to let these dry completely. Then we're going to break out an umber wash, and then we're going to do some of the gold inset, and we'll talk about that when we get there. But these pieces of gold that I'm painting stick up, right? They stand up. They're raised. But the ones that are inset are the problem. So we will come back and paint everything else, but we're going to start with washes now, because the recessed parts need a gold wash to sink into them, but I want to do the umber wash first to darken everything up. But we'll come back and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, time to apply our wash. Remember, if your wash is too thick for your liking, add water. If it's too thin for your liking, add a smidge of paint. So I am applying an umber wash, and it's a fairly thick wash for me. Usually I work with thinner washes, but I really want to dirty this up. I want to dirty up my whole Hall of Heroes thing. I want it gross. I want it not gross, but I want it to look like it's been around a while, look like it's really been in use for a long time. And when I'm doing this, for the walls, I make sure I get the walls. So when I get the walls, I get the edges, because those parts you're going to see. Remember, you're not going to see the sides of the floors when they're put together, right? But you are going to see the sides of the walls. So the floors, don't worry about the sides if you're doing something like I am. But with the walls, you definitely want to get the edges, right? Because they will be visible. So the tops and the sides will all be visible. And remember, if you don't like, so if I wanted to thin out my wash, I would add some water. But I don't want to thin out my wash, so I put too much wash on here, so I'm just going to steal some from here. If you put too much wash on one tile, just steal it from another. So I'm just stealing it from over here and put it on there. And then when you finish, you have to let it dry before you turn it over. So not all of these need to be turned over. Obviously, these little tiles don't need to be turned over at all. But the wall tiles have to be turned over because we want to get both sides. There we go. And the idea is you're using a wash because it's really, really thin. And you want it in all those grooves. Now, what I am going to do, you notice I suddenly slowed down. I'm working on this door. And this door actually has a couple of insets that I really want to paint a gold. So I'm going to be very careful and very quickly go over them very, very fast so I don't leave too much, because I want to get those in with gold later. But that is all the individual pieces. Now I'm just doing pieces that are a repeat, so we absolutely don't have to watch all of this because all these pieces are just repeats. But I'm doing the entire thing. We will come back and I will flip them over and do the other side. But again, on these door pieces, very, very fast. Right? And try not to let too much of that wash settle in where I'm definitely wanting to put gold wash over top. But this coat has to dry completely before the next coat. Okay, before we flip them over, it has to dry completely. Otherwise, it'll rub off on the paper towel when we flip them over. And do remember, put paper towel underneath when you are working with a wash, just because it's going to overflow and look gross. So definitely put paper towel down. Or cloth. Anyway, we will come back as soon as that is completely dry. Alright, so that's pretty well dry. We're going to flip these over. Just flip over the ones that do need to be painted on the other side. If you have floor tiles, you don't have to worry about that. So we're just going to flip those over real quick. And we are going to very quickly run these guys over with a little more wash. Now you do have to watch out. Again, this one here, it has a hammer that we're going to fill in that little bit, that little sunken spot with gold. So we are kind of being careful, kind of making sure that we're not getting too much wash in that little rune area and sweeping off when we accidentally just did. That was too much. And we're just going to keep doing this until we have done all of them. And we're going to just quickly, what you're doing basically is pushing that wash into those grooves. That's where we want it. Okay, we want it on everything because I do want it to look aged, but mostly we want it in those grooves because otherwise those grooves don't really show up. That's the primary point of a wash, is we want these grooves to show up. Okay, that's the primary point here, is sinking into those grooves and making sure that they actually look like what they're supposed to look like. Okay? That's what we're doing. I'm just scooping off the extra wash off of them and applying it to a different one. It works really well if you need to. You just scoop up a little bit of wash and take it with you to the next one. if you accidentally apply too much, or you can always use a paper towel to dab it and get it off that way. Whatever works for you to get the appropriate amount of wash. What is an appropriate amount of wash? That's a good question. And the answer there is however much you think is appropriate. And I phrase it like that because it doesn't matter if I think you applied too much or too little wash. It does not matter at all. What matters is that you are happy with how much you applied because you like the way it looks. Okay? That's what matters more than anything, is making sure you like how it looks and that you're not disappointed. So we're just going to let these dry, and I'm going to paint the off-camera ones. Well, I have the camera not running because you don't need to watch me do all of that. But now we have to let these dry thoroughly because the next step is adding gold wash where we need the gold wash. But that means letting this dry completely so our gold and our umber washes do not mix. All right, now we're going to add our gold wash into these little runic areas, the inset ones, and we're going to do it with a really small brush because we want this gold wash to pretty much stay right here. And we are going to do that anywhere these runes are, which in this case is actually just on 2 different types of pieces. It's only on the long walls and the doors. Now, I'll have to flip the doors over to do the other side. Right now, that's what we're doing. And I have a couple other doors here that I have to do as well. And off to the side here, I have one more long wall. But you want to be really careful when you're doing washes like this. Usually I use a big brush for washes, but in this case, I want to use a tiny brush because I just want to get a little bit filled in so that it can sink into those grooves. Okay, that's what we're doing. Very gentle, very small amount into those grooves. And I'm using a gold wash because I want all the runes gold. But in order to get that gold wash, I had to really dilute a gold paint. And then you just basically let the wash flow off your brush into the grooves. And then you just let it sit in there until it's completely dry. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to walk away and make sure this is completely dry. Then come back, flip the doors over. And in the meantime, you can start planning out if you want to do any kind of dry brushing or anything. I don't think I'm going to. I was originally thinking I might do some dry brushing, but I don't think I will. So we're going to let that dry, then we'll come back and turn over those last couple of doors so we can do the other side. Then we'll be pretty close to done. Okay, we're just going to quickly flip these doors over. These doors are the only pieces that have that inset on both sides. And we're just going to do that. And as soon as we have done that, we are going to take these. I'm going to go spray them. I'll do that off camera. I'll spray them to seal them, assemble it, and you can see what it looks like all put together. But yes, these are absolutely some of my favorite brands to use for our campaigns. Again, these are Dungeons and Lasers. There will be a link in the description. No, I don't get any money from those links. Purchase them directly from the manufacturer if you can. I mean, yeah, sometimes they're available on Amazon and stuff, but direct from the manufacturer supports them a little bit better, and they are fantastic. They are designed in Poland, Polish company. They're fantastic. Again, link in the description. Anyway, we have to let that completely dry. While that's drying, I'm going to go and spray the pieces that are already dry, and then we will come back and look at it when it is completely assembled, because that is always my favorite part. And there we go, all finished, all assembled, looking good and ready for our next campaign. This was the Hall of Heroes from Dungeons and Lasers. Check out the video description for a link to the manufacturer, and I might put a link down to the Amazon link if I choose. I'd really rather people order directly from the manufacturer because that's just better for everyone. But they do come from Poland, and sometimes you might live in an area where you can't receive packages that come from out of country, so that's a consideration. That's about it for us today. I hope you'll be back with us next time. Bye!